In the next few minutes, I'm exposing 9 beer brands Americans defend like they're untouchable, even though the beer inside the can has quietly gotten worse, while the label stayed sacred. These aren't obscure picks, they're the classic names people swear by, even as cost-cutting shortcuts, industrial processing, and shelf-life engineering replace the beer they remember. Stay until the end, because I'll give you 4 cleaner, more honest options that still taste like real beer without the loyalty tax. This is for adults of legal drinking age who choose to drink, and if you do, stop defending memories and start demanding freshness, ingredient discipline, and transparency. Number 9. Bud Light. Bud Light gets defended with one word: light. People hear light and assume clean, like it is the responsible option. But in industrial beer, light usually means stripped down, then rebuilt. The brewing approach is designed to create alcohol efficiently and cheaply, then smooth the result so it feels easy. That easy sensation is engineered. Start with the base. Light beer at this scale is optimized for maximum consistency with minimum character. When you minimize character, you minimize complaints, because there is less for anyone to dislike. That is the business logic. Then the company leans on industrial filtration and process control to keep the product stable over time. It is not brewed to be expressive. It is brewed to be predictable. What they do not tell you is how much modern light beer depends on correction. Once the base is thinned, the experience has to be shaped. Carbonation tuned to feel crisp, bitterness tuned to feel like beer, mouthfeel managed so it does not feel like flavored water. None of this is illegal. The point is that the beer becomes a manufactured profile, not a proud ingredient story. Bud Light is also an everyday habit beer. People do not drink it once a year. They drink it routinely, and routine is where opacity matters. If you are going to consume something often, you should demand clarity. Where it is made, how it is made, and what the company will disclose beyond the legal minimum. Bud Light hides behind the fact that most customers do not ask questions. And here is the trap. Because Bud Light is so familiar, people defend it as if criticism is elitism. It is not elitism to say a beer should taste like beer without a corporate story doing the heavy lifting. That is basic respect for your own standards. Do a simple test. Pour it into a glass and let it warm slightly. Not hot, just not ice numb. The thinness shows up fast. The flavor collapses into faint sweetness and faint bitter snap because the beer was never meant to stand on its own. That is why the brand pushes ice cold as a virtue. Ice cold is camouflage. If your beer needs camouflage, it is not a classic. It is a compromise. Number 8. Coors Light. Coors Light is the mountain purity fantasy in a silver can. People defend it because the marketing feels clean, cold, crisp, refreshing, straight from nature. But a clean vibe is not a clean process. Coors Light is engineered for maximum drinkability with minimum friction, and that usually means minimum flavor and maximum stability. When a brand's core promise is refreshing, it often translates to, we removed anything that could offend anyone. Less malt character, less hop complexity, less fermentation personality. The beer becomes a blank canvas, and then the company uses manufacturing decisions to make that canvas feel like something. Tight process control, heavy filtration, standardized inputs, carbonation tuned for sensation. The end result is crispness without depth. What they do not tell you is that durability is the real product. Coors Light is built to survive long logistics. It is built to sit in warehouses, on pallets, in coolers, and still taste acceptable after time and temperature shifts. The longer you ask a beer to remain fine, the more you push it toward blandness and industrial processing. Real beer rewards freshness. Industrial beer rewards shelf performance. And mild is not proof of quality. Mild is often proof of removal. Removal is achieved through filtration and standardization that turn a fermented drink into a predictable commodity. That is why fans describe it with feelings instead of details. They say it is smooth and easy. They rarely say what it tastes like, because the tasting notes are mostly absence. Coors built an entire identity around coldness. Cold-activated labels, silver imagery, mountains, the implication that colder means purer. But cold is not a quality metric. Cold is a distraction. It reduces your ability to detect sweetness, staleness, and flat bitterness. A beer that is truly well made can be served cold and still taste like ingredients. A beer that is built to be served freezing cold is often built that way because it needs the mask. If you are defending Coors Light as pure, ask yourself what you mean. Pure should mean transparent, simple, and proudly explained. If the brand's purity is mostly a mountain picture and a can that changes color, it is not purity, it is branding. Number 7. Miller Lite. Miller Lite is defended like it invented adulthood. People associate it with a certain era, a certain bar stool, a certain weekend. But nostalgia is not quality control, and modern Miller Lite is a case study in how industrial beer protects a taste memory while optimizing everything behind the scenes. Chasing light at this scale often requires intervention. You cannot depend on natural grain character because grain character varies, so the process becomes more controlling. The beer is engineered to hit a narrow target: a lean body, a dry finish, a predictable bite, a consistent foam. That consistency is achieved through systems designed to reduce variation, not through ingredient expression. What they do not tell you is that when you chase a narrow target, you often sacrifice the pleasant imperfections that make beer feel alive. Real brewing has edges. It has subtle differences from batch to batch. Industrial brewing treats those differences as defects, so it removes them. The result is a beer that feels clean in the way a blank wall feels clean. Nothing to argue with, nothing to praise. Miller Lite benefits from being an identity beer. It signals no fuss. That is great for marketing, but it becomes a trap for consumers. The lack of fuss becomes a lack of standards. People stop asking about freshness. They stop asking about what changed since the older decades. They stop asking whether the beer is good or merely familiar. And there is a distribution reality most fans ignore. Beer quality depends on time and temperature. Light beer is especially vulnerable to becoming sweetness and dull bitterness as it ages. When a brand is designed for national distribution, it inevitably prioritizes stability. That means your local shelf beer may be built to be fine rather than built to be best. If you want Miller Lite as a once-in-a-while stadium beer, that is your choice. But defending it as a benchmark is dishonest. Today, it is a manufactured profile protected by branding and memory, not a beer protected by ingredient pride. Number 6. Pabst Blue Ribbon. Pabst is the authenticity trap. People defend it because it feels anti-corporate, cheap, plain, ironic, almost rebellious. But cheap beer is not automatically honest beer. Cheap beer is often the most optimized beer on the shelf, and optimization is where quality gets squeezed. Here is the uncomfortable math. When a beer is priced to stay attractive through packaging costs, distribution, and inflation, the company has to protect margins somewhere. The easiest place is what you cannot see: input quality, sourcing flexibility, and time. When a brand leans on bargain identity, it becomes easier to justify bargain execution. The consumer is trained to expect good enough, and the company delivers exactly that. Pabst also benefits from a social shield. Criticize it, and you get labeled snobby, as if caring about quality is a moral failure. That social pressure is convenient for the brand because it turns your friends into enforcement. Meanwhile, the beer is built to be cold, neutral, and forgettable. It is designed to disappear into the moment, so you focus on the vibe, not the liquid. What they do not tell you is that simple can be honest, or it can be lazy. Honest simple is clean fermentation, balanced bitterness, and a finish that feels crisp without tasting thin. Lazy simple is mild sweetness, faint grain, and hollow bitterness that exists mostly to remind you it is beer. Pabst leans toward the second. Another issue is accountability. Brands positioned as bargain staples often have complicated manufacturing arrangements. Facilities shift, supply decisions shift. The can looks the same, so people assume the liquid is the same. But acceptable consistency is not the same as craft consistency. That is the difference between a brewer chasing flavor and a corporation chasing shelf space. If you want a cheap beer, fine, but do not defend Pabst like it is purity. Purity is about ingredients and process integrity, not about an ironic story and a low price tag. Number 5. Corona Extra. Corona is defended because it's not just a beer. It's a lifestyle advertisement you can hold in your hand. The clear bottle, the lime wedge, the beach fantasy, the implication that nothing matters and nothing is complicated. And when a brand sells mood instead of substance, people stop interrogating quality. They don't ask about freshness. They don't ask about how the beer was handled in transit. They don't ask what happens to a light-sensitive product when it sits under bright retail lighting for weeks. They don't ask what compromises are required to keep that bottle looking clean and Instagram-friendly. Start with the obvious problem nobody wants to admit. Corona's clear glass is a quality penalty. Light exposure is brutal on beer. It doesn't just warm it up. It degrades flavor chemistry and pushes the beer toward off notes that shouldn't exist in a properly protected product. Dark bottles exist for a reason. Cans exist for a reason. If a beer is built with any respect for stability and flavor integrity, it gets packaged like it matters. Corona chooses the opposite, because the packaging is the brand. The bottle is the billboard, and once the bottle becomes the billboard, the liquid has to adapt to the billboard, not the other way around. So what happens when a brand insists on clear bottles for marketing? It forces the producer to compensate. Compensation usually looks like a flavor profile designed to be simple enough that damage is less noticeable. You don't design for nuance, because nuance is fragile. You design for durability. You design for consistency under mediocre conditions. You design a beer that can survive long distribution and still taste fine when it's ice cold. That is not how you make great beer. That's how you make beer that tolerates being treated badly. And when a beer is engineered to tolerate abuse, you're already looking at a product built around compromise. Then culture adds the lime ritual, and people call it tradition. But be honest about what it does. It brightens, it masks, it distracts. It gives your brain a fresh citrus signal that overrides subtle cues your senses would otherwise catch: staleness, light damage, flatness, that slightly tired finish. If your beer needs a garnish to feel complete, that should raise a question. Good beer is complete on its own. Corona took incompleteness and turned it into an aesthetic. That's not craft, that's choreography. And notice how people often drink Corona straight from the bottle. That's convenient for the brand, because drinking from the bottle mutes aroma and reduces your ability to detect flaws. Aroma is where beer tells the truth. Aroma is where freshness shows up, where oxidation shows up, where light damage shows up. A beer that's proud of itself wants you to smell it. A beer that relies on ritual prefers your senses stay quiet. Bottle drinking, ice-cold serving, lime wedge, these are protective layers. They don't improve quality. They reduce your ability to notice when quality is missing. So if you're defending Corona as a classic, ask what you're actually defending. The beer, or the feeling you get when you hold it? Corona sells feeling. Feeling is not quality. Feeling is marketing, and marketing is expensive, so the product has to pay for it somewhere. Number 4. Stella Artois. Stella is the premium pricing shield. People defend it because it costs more than domestic light beer and wears European heritage like armor. The glassware marketing, the elegant label, the quiet implication that you upgraded. And once someone feels like they upgraded, the brain stops asking questions. That's the real product being sold: reassurance. But premium image is not a substitute for transparency, and price is not proof of ingredient discipline. Here's the uncomfortable part. Mass premium beer often runs the same industrial playbook as mass budget beer. The difference is the story. When a brand operates at global scale, it faces the same pressures no matter what tier it claims to live in. Consistent taste, consistent look, consistent shelf performance, consistent profit. Those pressures reward standardization and sourcing flexibility. They reward processes that can absorb change without the customer noticing. They reward input optionality, where the brand can swap suppliers, tweak ratios, and adjust methods while the label stays frozen in time. That isn't romance. That's manufacturing wearing a tuxedo. And price becomes camouflage. If you pay more, you feel smarter. If you feel smarter, you question less. That's how a brand can maintain pricing power without maintaining ingredient superiority. You're not buying the best lager. You're buying the signal that you're not drinking cheap beer. The beer comes along for the ride. It's the loyalty tax dressed up as sophistication. Stella leans hard on crisp as its identity, but crisp is not a virtue by itself. Crisp can mean careful fermentation, clean malt character, and real freshness. Or crisp can mean stripping a beer down until nothing can go wrong. When a beer is engineered to survive long distribution, bright displays, and variable storage, it often gets flattened into a safer shape. That crisp becomes thinness. That clean becomes absence. And absence isn't elegance. It's a lack of character disguised as refinement. The most troubling part is what happens inside your head. Stella becomes the safe upgrade that ends the conversation. You order it to feel refined without doing homework. And that is exactly how mid-quality becomes entrenched. The brand doesn't have to prove it's excellent, it just has to be defendable. It just has to be the import you can order without looking insecure, the bottle you can bring without looking cheap, the choice you can make without thinking. That's not premium beer behavior. That's premium branding behavior. If you want to pay for premium beer, demand premium standards, clearer disclosure, fresher product, and a process that doesn't rely on heritage as a shield. Stella sells image first. Once you see that, it's hard to unsee it. Number 3. Heineken. Heineken is the import Americans treat like an automatic upgrade. The green bottle, the international reputation, the quiet assumption that European means better. But global reputation is not a purity certificate. In fact, global scale can make purity harder, because the system stops being about brewing and starts being about replication. Uniformity becomes the product. Predictable distribution becomes the product. And when the mission is to deliver the same experience across thousands of environments, integrity is rarely the first priority. Performance is, packaging matters, and Heineken's packaging choice is not a neutral detail. Green glass is a quality risk. More light gets through than in darker glass, and light exposure is brutal on beer flavor and aroma. That means a brand committed to green glass has to engineer for resilience. You don't build a delicate, nuanced beer and then put it into a container that increases its vulnerability and hope the world handles it gently. You design the beer to survive the world. That often means a sturdier, more standardized profile, less fragile, less subtle, because fragile beer does not survive that treatment gracefully. And you can hear normalization in the jokes. People joke about that skunky note like it's a signature, like it's part of the charm. That's not charm. That's damage disguised as personality. When consumers accept a flaw as a feature, the brand no longer has incentive to correct it. The flaw becomes marketing. It becomes identity. It becomes the thing people defend. And once a flaw becomes defendable, the cost to improve quality becomes unnecessary from a corporate perspective. The consumer has already done the hard work. They've emotionally reframed a quality problem as tradition. Heineken also benefits from being a default. It's everywhere, so it feels safe. It feels familiar. It feels like a known quantity. But being everywhere means living in the same distribution reality as every macro brand. Unknown storage conditions, bright retail displays, long transit times, warm back rooms, and months of sitting still while the label continues to promise freshness it cannot guarantee. If a beer's best version exists only when it's extremely fresh, a global distribution chain is the worst environment imaginable. Yet the branding asks you to trust anyway, because trust is cheaper than transparency. If you choose to drink as an adult, treat default as a warning, not comfort. Default usually means optimized for sales and survivability, not optimized for ingredient discipline, freshness, or integrity. Number 2, Guinness Draught. This is the sacred cow. People defend Guinness like it's a cultural institution, not a product on a shelf. They'll tell you it's smooth, traditional, basically a meal, and somehow better for you. That last claim is where nostalgia turns into armor, because once a beer gets labeled as the smart choice, people stop questioning it. They stop asking what changed, what's optimized, and what trade-offs were made to keep that experience identical in every bar, every stadium, every grocery store, and every country. Guinness is iconic, but iconic does not mean unchanged. Any brand built on global consistency has to make modern decisions. It has to behave predictably in distribution. It has to pour predictably. It has to taste predictably. And predictability at massive scale doesn't come from romance. It comes from control. Control looks like system design, process management, and performance targets that keep the product stable through time, shipping, storage, and wildly different serving environments. The story people repeat is old-world simplicity. The reality is modern reliability delivered in millions of identical moments. And the defense always circles back to texture, creamy head, smooth mouthfeel, roasted note. That texture can be genuinely enjoyable, but texture can also be engineered. When a beer feels unusually consistent across huge scale, that should trigger curiosity, not blind trust. Consistency isn't automatically proof of purity. Sometimes it's proof of optimization. And when consumers treat the brand like a cultural treasure, That cultural protection reduces scrutiny. It becomes impolite to ask questions, and the company doesn't have to volunteer answers. The ritual reinforces the protection. Nitro cans, widgets, the cascading pour, the theater in the glass. It looks like craft even when it's system. Ritual can be beautiful, but it can also be a distraction. The more you admire the performance, the less you interrogate the product. The experience becomes the selling point, and the brand becomes the shortcut. You don't evaluate it, you repeat it. Then there's the basically a meal line, which turns beer into a wellness story. Beer is alcohol, it is not health food. If you choose to drink as an adult, treat it as a choice, not as a vitamin. Guinness benefits from that myth because the myth reduces friction. It makes people feel justified, even virtuous, for choosing a beer. Enjoy it if you want. Just stop defending it like it's immune to modern pressures. It isn't. No brand at that scale is. Number 1. Samuel Adams Boston Lager. This one will make people angry because it hits a nerve. Samuel Adams is defended as the respectable middle ground. Not macrolight beer, not niche, craft, but real beer. People treat the name like a guarantee, but a name is not a process, and a reputation is not a living standard. Samuel Adams became a symbol when Americans learned beer could taste like something. For many people, it was their first step away from bland lager. Because it played that role, it gets defended like a hero. But growth changes incentives. When a brand becomes a national staple with huge volume expectations, it starts making decisions for stability and consistency. Portfolio expansion pressures standardization. Distribution pressures shelf performance. Retail presence pressures the beer to behave the same under conditions that crush nuance. Predictability is where distinctiveness goes to die. The beer gets smoother, safer, less surprising, less alive. That is often the outcome of chasing broad acceptability at scale. The goal becomes reducing complaints, not maximizing character. The beer becomes engineered to be defended, not engineered to be great. Craft reputation can outlive craft behavior. A brand can keep the language of quality while migrating into the compromise zone. It can rely on consumers who remember what it represented in an earlier chapter. That memory becomes a shield. The label becomes a shortcut to trust. Look at expansion. More varieties, more seasonal hype, more shelf grabs. Expansion is not automatically evil, but it creates temptation to standardize the core so the machine runs smoothly. When the machine runs smoothly, beer becomes deliverable, not art. The naysayer test is simple. If Samuel Adams disappeared tomorrow, and the same liquid appeared under a random label, would people still treat it as benchmark? Or would it be fine and forgotten? If your answer is fine, you are not defending beer. You are defending branding. That is why Samuel Adams is number 1. It is not the worst tasting beer on earth. It is the most defended beer that no longer earns its defense. 4 cleaner directions to go instead. Now that we have exposed the 9 brands Americans defend out of habit, here is the good news. If you are an adult who chooses to drink, you do not have to quit beer. You just have to stop rewarding nostalgia and opacity. The goal is not perfection. The goal is beer that does not need clever misdirection to justify itself. Cleaner does not mean healthy. Beer is alcohol. It is never a wellness hack. Cleaner means ingredient simplicity, transparency, and a process that does not depend on durability tricks as the main selling point. Cleaner means the beer still tastes like ingredients when it is not ice, numb, cold. Number 4. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. A good pale ale forces honesty. If hops are generic, you taste it. If malt is thin, you taste it. That is why pale ale is a reliable test of brewing discipline. This beer has stayed a reference point because it still tastes like actual hops and malt, not like a blank profile with a bittering snap. And because it is widely distributed, it is the kind of upgrade an adult can actually make without hunting down a unicorn. Number 3. Allagash White. Belgian-style wheat beers can be abused by companies that want to sell spice without real fermentation character. Better versions are bright from yeast, soft from grain, and balanced by real ingredients, not by artificial cues. This style proves light and refreshing, does not require stripping beer into flavored water. When it is well made, it tastes complete without any ritual doing the quality work. Number 2. Weihenstephaner Hefeweiss beer. If you want ingredient discipline, look at classic German-style wheat beer made by producers with long traditions and strict standards. The point is simplicity enforced by culture. A good Hefe tastes like wheat, yeast, and thyme. It tastes alive because it is allowed to have character. And when you drink a beer like that, you realize how many mass brands trained you to accept thinness as normal. Number 1. A quality-focused Helles or Pilsner from a producer that emphasizes ingredient simplicity and freshness over branding theater. For many adults, the best upgrade is not more extreme beer. It is a better version of what they already like. Clean lager with real malt flavor, balanced bitterness, and a crisp finish that does not taste hollow. Depending on where you live, this might be a respected regional craft lager or a well-regarded import that protects its beer and treats freshness as part of the product. If you want an even safer direction, there is also the option most people ignore: high-quality, non-alcoholic beer from reputable producers. For adults who want ritual without alcohol, modern non-alcoholic brewing has improved dramatically. It will not replace every beer, but it removes the alcohol variable entirely while still letting you enjoy hops and malt. Here are the rules that make this list work. 1. Stop equating light with clean. Light often means engineered. 2. Stop treating brand history as a guarantee. A legendary past can hide a compromised present. 3. Prioritize transparency and protective packaging. Beer that survives because it is protected and fresh is usually better than beer that survives because it has been flattened into durability. 4. Do not let rituals do the quality work. If a beer needs extreme cold, a lime, or a story to be enjoyable, that is a red flag. And one more rule, the one nobody wants to hear. If you find yourself defending a beer emotionally, that is usually the sign the beer cannot defend itself. There you have it. 9 beer brands Americans defend like they're untouchable, even though the product inside the can is not what it used to be. And 4 cleaner directions if you still choose to drink as an adult. If this list hit your favorite, don't get defensive, get curious. Nostalgia is powerful, and these brands know it. They rely on memories to do the job transparency should be doing. But the label is not your identity. It's a product on a shelf, competing for your money, and it should have to earn that money every single time. Here's the standard moving forward. Stop asking, does it taste fine ice cold? Ice cold hides flaws. Ask, would I buy this if the logo was covered? Would you trust it on ingredient discipline, freshness, and honest sourcing? Or does it collapse the moment the story disappears? Because that's the trick with legacy brands. The story stays frozen in time, while the formula quietly evolves to serve scale, consistency, and cost control. And when that happens, you're not paying for quality. You're paying a loyalty tax. If you still drink, you don't need perfection. You need clarity. Choose brands that publish real information, prioritize simpler inputs, and don't hide behind heritage to avoid scrutiny. And if you don't drink, keep it that way. Nobody needs alcohol to live well. Now, tell me the next category you want investigated. Hard seltzer, vodka, tequila, energy drinks, coffee, olive oil, or something else people defend out of habit. Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who treats their favorite can like a personality trait, share this with them. You do not need more beer. You need better beer, or you need none.